I bet you never knew that they had reissued these. Welcome back, troglodytes, to your daily dose of guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. That's right, we're talking about the weird flattened pancake Les Paul guitars again, better known as the solid body L5. These things were first introduced in the year 1972, and you can check out this review and demo right here to learn all about the nitty-gritty details of these. But did you know they actually reissued these things? That's what we're unboxing over here. But it wasn't just a reissue, it was actually something more than that. It was an artist signature model. That's right, this is a signature model for the Rolling Stones' Ron Wood. He made them reissue the L5-S around the year 2015. Except for, it looks a little bit different this time. It's more like a Black Beauty Les Paul custom. There's some elements about this guitar that I love. There's some elements that I'm like, yeah, why did they spec it like that? But at the end of the day, it's just a cool Henry Juskowitz era reissue of a Norlin era guitar, and I love documenting those. So let's go ahead and talk about it. All right here. It's about the exact same shape for the most part. It definitely has the carved top as well as the carved back element to it, but it's a complete ebony finish. Now you could find them in the 70s in the ebony, but as far as I understand it, it's a pretty rare color since generally they were trying to show off all the crazy fancy flame tops. But this was a limited edition of 300 guitars. The first 50 were hand signed and played by Ronnie. The backside of the headstocks look like these, but then they did 250 regular ones, and that's what this one's part of. It's number 14, which I have it on good authority that's Ron's favorite number. I'm just kidding. So first impressions here, it's definitely not exactly the same. They changed up a whole bunch of stuff on this, but it does maintain a very similar feel and appearance. So let's go ahead and nitpick everything that they changed. So perhaps the first thing that you're noticing here is the pickup spacing just looks different. That's because they completely changed the end of the fretboard. This is completely leveled off. It's just like a regular Gibson. Whereas over here, you have more of that fancy beveled edge. So that changes the position of your neck pickup entirely. Or I guess side by side, it looks like they just lowered the bridge pickup actually. Next thing you'll notice, this has a stop bar tailpiece and an ABR1 bridge. However, if you watch the review and demo on this, not all of them come with the fancy L5-S trapeze tailpiece. Some of them did get a regular stop bar, but these typically had harmonica bridges, so that's new. Next, pay special attention to our control layout here. It appears we've got some sort of a master volume, master tone with our three-way toggle switch down here. That's vastly different than what we have over here, because this has dual volume and dual tone controls for each pickup, and honestly, I've always thought the layout of this guitar was a little bit crowded, so I must not have been alone on that. That's probably why it got simplified. Next up here, this reissue has a two-piece maple top. Not that you can really tell because of the ebony finish. Most of the vintage ones have 3 to 5 pieces. This is a particularly rare one-piece top though. And on a similar note to that, the backs would be the exact same. However, this reissue actually has a chambered core and is apparently layered similar to a pancake body, which the originals didn't necessarily have. But next, check out the binding. It's just like a Les Paul custom because that's what they were going for. Looks like 7-ply on the front, 5-ply on the back, single-ply heel cap, and single-ply along the neck. However, compare that to an original, our neck on here had multi-ply binding along the fretboard, including extra layers along the edge. Still had the 7-ply on the front, but as is typical with fancy archtop guitars, only 3-ply on the back. But this also has the heel cap, but that in itself is also 3-ply. And oh, our edges also have multi-ply going on. This just had so much binding layers on it, whereas this guy just quite isn't as fancy. And you're probably noticing that this is a remarkably thinner guitar. That's the thing about the L5-S originally, is it has so much binding back here. It's a really chunky looking guitar, but as you can tell, this reissue is a little bit more streamlined. It's still got the carved back, but it's not exactly the same. You'll also notice we decided to opt for regular black back plates. We don't actually have a wooden one, which I think kind of works since it's an ebony finish anyway. That's the big thing to know about these originals, is they're more of a wedge shape. They start off really thick and then they get slimmer as they go down here. Whereas our reissue still kind of does that. Like, it gets chunkier right here in the middle, but it kind of starts at about the same thickness and ends at the same thickness, but still has that whole carved back situation to it. Next up, let's talk about our headstocks. This one is built like a Les Paul custom, as we've been talking about, whereas this one was trying to be a solid body L5 with our flower pot. But you will notice the other big difference is abalone on the original L5-S, whereas we have mother of pearl on here. The exact same thing is true for our fretboard inlays. But the neck construction is the same. You can see the seam lines that they do have a 5-piece maple neck on these. And perhaps the biggest omission here is he did not want a volute on it. It's just a regular headstock over here, whereas all the original L5S's did indeed include this little bump on the back of the neck. So this was a pretty controversial model, but it wasn't just because it wasn't a one-for-one reissue. The biggest reason for the uproar over this model is this is not what people were expecting it to be. This is what they thought the signature would look like. It would be a one pickup version. He was very well known for donning one of those. And in fact, Ron is not the only member of the Rolling Stones that has a signature L5-S. Keith Richards also has one. And Gibson started to do these prototypes in the mid-2000s. You will see these occasionally show up on the open market. They're always listed as prototypes, but I view it more as I think that was just Gibson making a custom guitar for an artist, and then maybe it turns into something, maybe it doesn't. So you would find things like this one pickup version. There was also a 3 pickup one with a P94 in the middle position. I've also seen a cool red one, but then Richie Sambora also got some custom models of these. Now his go all the way out. If you thought the original headstock design of the L5S was cool, he harkens back to the old world Gibson, and it says the Gibson on it. He has a silver sparkle finish one. There's a really cool trans black flame top that has the diamond on the backside of the headstock. That just showed up on Reverb for absurd money. And I've also seen a cherry sunburst one with our fancy tailpiece. So if you're a collector like me that loves 70s and 80s models and likes checking out the modern day equivalent reissues, I guess you could say, most times they're just a glorified tribute or they're trying to modernize it. I just always have fun checking them out. So those are your options. Really expensive prototypes that the artist used. The signature Ronnie Wood version costs $5,499 brand new. But my friends, there is one more thing about this guitar that makes it incredibly rare. This thing is from the year 2015, which is smack dab in the middle of the Richlight era, which is 2011 through 2019. But this is one of those rare models that actually has an ebony fretboard. Now, to find the ebony fretboard models in the later period of the Richlight years, that's a little bit more common. So things like the Year of the Dog Les Paul or the Ice Flame Les Paul Custom, those are other examples. But to find it in the middle of the era, they definitely pulled some strings for Ronnie here to make his signature guitar well specced out, because he probably told him, no, we're not putting Richlight on this thing. We've waited too long. It must be perfect. I hope that's a good little crash course here. I've always been curious about how accurate these things are, and the honest answer is not very accurate at all. However, I don't think they were actually trying to be accurate. They were just trying to make this a new version. So let's go ahead and throw this version onto the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs. Because normally we look at the case candy and COA stuff before that, but unfortunately all the case candy for this one and COA have been misplaced. But they're so rare, I decided, who cares? Let's just review it. Well, hey, this thing polished up beautifully. We still have lots of polishing swirls and scratches and light play wear, so it's definitely not a mint condition collectible example necessarily. I mean, it's not so beat up that a collector wouldn't want it. But let's go ahead and dig into these specs. Our neck pickup is a Burstbucker 1, and then the bridge is a Burstbucker 2. But you're going to notice a few things about these pickups. This one has an oddly early date, October 24th of 2011, and it's abbreviated BB1. Whereas this one has a date that makes a little bit more sense, January of 2015. So that matches the year that this guitar was made, but then it's actually written out Burstbucker. You don't see that too often. So we'll have to take a look in our control cavity to see if maybe this neck pickup was replaced. It's possible they were just using up old stuff though. As far as our readings within the circuit, 8.15 in the bridge, neck position 7.69, and then the middle just for fun, about 4. But nothing too fancy in our pickup cavity here. You can kind of see the maple coloring in here, but I'm not really seeing how they constructed the body, to be honest. The spec sheet calls it a 2-piece maple top, which if you get it in the light just right, you can see that center seam running up here. But over here, it almost looks like there might be another one, but then it says the center portion is 3 pieces, and then the back is also 2-pieced. But it's that center portion that got chambered out somehow. But here's what the bridge pickup cavity looks like. Pretty much just more of the same. Now for our bridge and tailpiece. It's just your standard Gibson ABR1, no retaining wire, and the saddles stay in just fine. It is mounted historically, so no stud within the body, it's just the thumb wheel and post. I'm not sure if it's stock from the factory with 2 sets of thumb wheels, but people put those on there to avoid post lean. This one's like that on both sides. Our tailpiece is also gold, and it's full weight. But it's master volume, master tone, 3-way toggle switch down here. No pick guards on these beauties.
No, this is cool. I think this is what I might have been seeing over here. It's actually the maple wood grain, because I'm seeing a little bit more of that if you get it in the light just right. But moving on from our maple body, we've got the maple walnut neck. And again, the extra special for this particular year, ebony fretboard. You can see it's got lots of streaks in it. That's just probably what they were able to get. But I'd rather see some streaks like this rather than have them dye it all black. Gives it some character, but we've got the mother of pearl block inlays as well. These are 25.5-inch scale length guitars though, with a 12-inch fretboard radius. I get a 1.7-inch nut width, which increases to 2.09 by the 12. First fret neck depth of 0.83, that increases to 0.93 by the 12, so nice and 60s slender C. Here's that profile at the first fret and the 12th fret. The spec sheet calls it his own custom profile, but thin is definitely the way to describe it. We've got our nylon nut, and then here's our peghead veneer, with our mother of pearl Gibson logo, and our custom emblem, gold Grover tuners, all the fancy custom stuff you're used to. But instead of putting his name on the truss rod cover or anything, he just left it blank. Gives it a very classy look. But now onto our backside. I was really hoping this control cavity would show us some of the chambering, but nah, it looks like it's all completely sealed. And they must chamber out that center piece of the body before they put the top and back on. So I would assume it looks something similar to this, but just over here and maybe a shape like that. I suppose it could be even more, but who knows until I get an x-ray. But that's probably the reason why they went with this larger route like the original ones, because they just wanted to take more weight out of it. Now as far as if those pickups are original to this guitar, I don't know. Factory solder work on our capacitor here looks pretty bare, but I could see how that could potentially be replaced, but I could also see how it might be factory original. So let's just say other pickups have been in here, and what is currently in here may or may not be the original set. I'm pretty confident with the bridge, but that neck, let's just err on the side of caution and say it's been replaced. But this back is awesome. You see those lines? That's actually flame figuring of maple underneath. So this does have a flamed back, and honestly quite a nicely figured back. Since this one's a little bit more player's grade anyways, it's tempting just to strip the entire back of the guitar to expose that. However, you don't know if it's completely uniformly flamed or if there's like ugly mineral spots on it, and you'd be losing a lot of the original value of the guitar, but hey, it could be fun. But I do see that center seam line here, so two-piece top and back, which is better spec'd than most of the originals. I really just want to emphasize this point right here of how the guitar slopes down instead of being ultra chunky. At the lowest point with strings, it's about 2 inches, 1.95. Whereas the vintage originals, again, with strings, same area, it's 2.5. So it's a good ½ inch thinner right there, because you'll see that the heel cap lines up perfectly with the body. Whereas that's very far from the case over here. And you can also see how thick the binding gets in that area. This one stays uniformly thin, although the cutaway does kind of look strange, since it does bump up a little bit right there. It's quirky, it makes this one unique. But this one does have some buckle marks and other rash and various nicks and dings. It was definitely a played one. The keen eye will also notice a few lacquer chips along the binding. I remember seeing a couple of those, but right now the other ones aren't really standing out to me. Here's a pretty good angle of where you can see where the lacquer has sank into the seam lines. So it does indeed have the 3-piece maple with the 2 pieces of walnut. It's easiest to see on the headstock, but in person you definitely see it on the rest of the neck as well. And it's almost what looks like finish checking right there, but no, it's just from the lacquer sink. It's common to get a line just underneath the binding, and that's apparent on many locations of this guitar. You can see those same outlines around the nut. But we've got our gold Grover tuners. This one's serial number RW for Ron Wood 014. And we got a couple of dings on each side of our headstock. Oh my, even up here. The player must have just rested this against a brick wall or something. But all said and done here, it weighs 8 pounds, 13.5 ounces. Let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how this version of an L5-S sounds. I love this neck pickup in here. It is nice and juicy. And the middle pairs well. But the bridge doesn't really do much for me. But maybe with some distortion it'll come to life. Now that we know all about the Ronnie Wood signature L5-S, what are my final thoughts on this thing? It reminds me of a Chinese counterfeit, but I don't mean that in a bad way. I just mean it as somebody looked at an L5-S only by photos and then tried to build the guitar themselves. They missed all the little nuances that made the L5-S special. However, at the same time, this feels a little bit more traditional. I think more regular people that like Les Pauls would like this body shape a lot more so than the vintage originals, because let's face it, the vintage originals have a really weird thing going on with their whole clunky heel. This is very nice streamlined design. Now personally for me, I didn't really like this bridge pickup that much. I'm not sure if it has to do with where it's placed on the body. I mean, it sounded all right with distortion, but this neck pickup was just absolutely fantastic. So the fact that there are just humbucker versions out there, I don't know if that bodes so well for those. But every guitar is a little bit different. But if nothing else, my friends, I hope you enjoyed learning about this kind of rare, unusual Norlin era reissue model from the Henry J era. They're always lots of fun, and you can nitpick them as much as you want, but at the end of the day, this is an artist signature model that was spec'd out for Ron. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and we'll catch you tomorrow on the next episode. Take care.
If you enjoyed tonight's episode, consider subscribing. I post videos like this every day. And you might even enjoy this next one.